A lot of people think identity is something that you're born with. Like you either are something or you aren't. You're disciplined or you're lazy. You're confident or you're insecure. You're successful or you're a failure. But honestly, most identity is built through repetition. Things that you do repeatedly slowly become the person you believe that you are. I think people underestimate how powerful that really is. Because every single habit or routine or repeated thought is teaching your brain something about who you are, even when you don't fully realize it. And the smallest actions can shape you into who you are. A lot of people imagine change as some giant moment, some huge transformation where their entire life suddenly becomes different overnight. But real, true change usually happens quietly over time, in small actions, repeatedly and consistently. And that's how identity is formed. If someone constantly avoids difficult things, eventually they will start seeing themselves as weak. If someone repeatedly breaks promises to themselves, eventually they stop trusting themselves. If somebody constantly works on themselves, even in small ways, eventually that's how they see themselves too. So it can work both good and bad, because repetition sends messages to the brain, and every repeated behavior becomes evidence that it's working. Slowly over time, that evidence forms your identity. But the scary part about it is your brain doesn't really care whether a habit is healthy or unhealthy. It only cares what gets repeated. And that's why people can accidentally train themselves into negativity or insecurity or avoidance or anger or self-destruction without necessarily meaning to or trying to. Because repeated self-hatred might become your identity. Repeated procrastination might become your identity. But after a while, people will like to make excuses, and they'll say, that's just who I am. And that's how powerful the repetition is, because it convinces you that that's who you are now. I want you to know it's not just physical acts and actions, it's thoughts as well. The things you repeatedly tell yourself matter. If someone spends years thinking that they're not enough or that they ruin things, they will never change. And eventually those thoughts will stop feeling like thoughts. They will start feeling like facts, and they will feel real. And when something feels like identity, people protect it, even if it does hurt them. And that's why change becomes so difficult. Because people aren't just changing habits, they're changing the story they believe about themselves. And this is why identity is so important. Because behavior usually follows identity. Someone who sees themselves as disciplined will act differently than someone who believes they're incapable, for example. Someone who believes they deserve healthy love tolerates different things than someone who believes they're unlovable. People naturally move toward behaviors that match the version of themselves that they believe in. And that's why lasting change is deeper than just motivation. Because motivation fades and identity stays for good. And you become what you practice, I think, is the easiest way I can tell you to help with this. I think a lot of people forget that we adapt to whatever repeated practice we choose. You can practice confidence. You can practice insecurity. You can practice discipline. You can practice avoidance. Even emotional reactions become habits. The brain strengthens whatever pathway gets used the most, which means the person you become tomorrow is heavily influenced by what you repeatedly do today. And that's why small habits matter more than people believe. Because little things repeated long enough stop being little things. Now, I think if you're understanding me correctly, this should give you a little hope. Because if repetition helped create your current identity, repetition can also rebuild it and remake it. Again, it's going to be slow. It's not just going to happen overnight. But consistently, every single time that you keep a promise to yourself, you build trust with yourself. And every time you respond differently instead of repeating an old pattern that you used to do, you weaken the identity attached to that behavior. And eventually, the new behavior starts feeling natural. And that's when the real change happens. Not when it becomes forced, but when it becomes part of who you are. What I want you to take away from this is people don't become someone new in one single moment. They become someone new through repeated actions, repeated thoughts, and repeated choices. Because repetition creates your identity. Whether people realize it or not, they are constantly becoming the things they practice most. That's all I have for you today. I really appreciate every single person taking the time to listen and reflect. And hopefully this series helps you understand yourself a little more in a deeper sense. Thank you all. As always, stay rolly.